Sometimes the hardest decisions arrive quietly. Not with horns or headlines, but with a sound so small it slips past your defenses and goes straight to your heart. For me, it was 3 thin whimpers under a frost-silvered spruce at the edge of the Bitterroot Range. Morning air tasted like pine and iron. A raven clicked somewhere to my left. And at my feet, 3 knots of gray fur pressed into each other, trembling as if the cold itself had teeth. Their mother was gone. The tracks told a story I didn't want to read twice. A scatter of struggle, larger prints circling, a drag line disappearing into timber. If I backed away, the forest would finish what it started. "You won't survive the day," I whispered, and the biggest pup, wide-eyed and stubborn, lifted his head and stared right into me like he understood the vote I was about to cast. I've been called a lot of things in this town. Stubborn, private, the woman who lives too close to the tree line in a cabin that's too far from everyone else. But I know a promise when it stands there shivering. I wrapped them into my coat and took them home. By sundown, Ravine Falls knew. News runs downhill faster than water, and this place is all slopes and ears. My phone buzzed until the battery gave up. 3 messages from my closest neighbor. "This is a terrible idea. They're wild animals. Call animal control before you get attached." Too late. I cleaned out the old kennel where my last shepherd is buried in the yard, set heat pads beneath clean straw, and mixed formula in a saucepan because every store within 50 miles had formula for everything except wolf pups. I didn't sleep. I listened, to the whir of the heater, to the chorus of tiny hungry sounds, to my own pulse counting the miles I'd just put between myself and a normal life. They got names when I learned their rhythms. Ash, the biggest, the first to explore, to test a corner with his nose and look back over his shoulder as if daring the world to say no. Frost, watchful, the second shadow, he kept his distance and memorized me before he trusted me. Willow, smallest, softest, the one who needed to feel the other's breathing before she'd close her eyes. Feeding every few hours blurred my nights into the color of milk. I read out loud to keep them used to my voice because silence, I knew, can turn into a wall. I moved slow. I let them smell the back of my hand before I ever asked for more. When Frost touched my fingers with his nose for the first time, it felt like a true sign in the oldest language there is. Word got louder. A radio host said my name like it rhymed with reckless. A Facebook group called me the Wolf Lady before I even learned to like the sound of it. At the diner, a man I'd split fence posts with said, "They'll turn on you the second they remember what they are." They never forgot what they were. I just refused to forget what I was responsible for them. I built a proper enclosure, post hole digger, concrete, dig guards, roof netting, the whole paranoid diagram, then drove to Missoula to meet a wildlife behaviorist who looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You're standing on a knife's edge. They won't be dogs. Accept that now or you'll accept it in blood later." I took the warning and the binder of protocols she slid across the table. I drove home with equal parts dread and resolve, and when I pulled in, Ash greeted me with that confident, "Do you see me" stance that makes your throat hurt with pride. We found a rhythm. Morning feed and enrichment, antler chews, puzzle feeders, scatter feeding to keep their minds working. Then forest walks on long lines with obedience folded into the landscape. Sit for a squirrel, down for a wind gust, stay while a hawk threw its shadow on us and the trees shivered with birds. I channeled their instincts instead of fighting them, and I never forgot the distance I had to keep inside my own heart. Love that holds a line. The town didn't know what to do with me. Some folks brought donations, frozen meat, a bag of lamb bones, a crate of kennel toys. Others stood at the fence with their arms crossed, waiting for proof they were right about monsters. One afternoon, a local TV crew hiked up the driveway, breathless and curious. I didn't want spectacle, but hiding only feeds fear. We shot carefully, my cues, their responses, the soft huff Ash makes when he leans his weight into my palm, Willow creeping forward to take food from an open hand, Frost circling once, twice, then making the choice to trust. They aired 90 seconds of tenderness in a 5-minute segment about danger. Ratings, I guess. But even that small window changed a few minds. Not many. Enough to breathe. And then, almost exactly when their paws outgrew the prints I'd memorized, trouble started walking on 2 tracks. Rumor and something bigger. A rancher 3 miles west lost to you. The trail cam footage was a smear of moonlight in motion, the shape too large for a coyote, too thick through the shoulders for a stray dog. By breakfast, the story had my wolves sprinting across county lines like ghosts with alibis. I pulled my own camera logs and stacked them on a USB. Time stamps, GPS pins, a tidy proof that Ash, Frost, and Willow spent the night within 12 feet of my kitchen window. Facts don't trend. Fear does. I drove the USB to the sheriff's substation and met a deputy named Ryan whose face could have been carved from one of the limestone bluffs outside town. He didn't like my wolves and I didn't blame him. He liked unsolved problems even less. We talked tracks and timelines until the fluorescent lights made everything look dishonest. He said he'd keep an eye out. I said I always do. That night, a gunshot cracked somewhere beyond the ridge. Willow bolted for the rear of the enclosure, Frost shouldered in front of her like a half-grown guardian, and Ash lifted his head and stared into the dark as if he could stare it down. The next morning, I found a new hole in the story, literally. A bullet had chewed a splinter out of the corner post. No note. No knock on the door. Just the kind of message you don't confuse twice. I reinforced the fence again. I was 8 the first time my father taught me how to listen to a forest. Not here. Listen. We were in Colorado then, the San Juan's turning gold, the air so clear it felt like you could drink it. He crouched beside a game trail and pressed my hand flat to the ground. What do you feel? Dirt, I said. He shook his head. Wait. Direction. Timing. The earth remembers. Let it tell you who passed and why. We stayed still until the wind brought us the rest of the sentence. Faint hoofbeats, a branch tip tapping the trunk like a metronome, a jay announcing us to anything with ears. He smiled the way men smile when the world makes sense for a second. You take care of wild things first by knowing when to leave them alone. Second by showing up when the world didn't. That was the day I learned the difference between rescuing because it feels good and rescuing because it's right. Most days it's not a feeling. It's a choice you renew. The stories like this speak to you, stick around. Hit subscribe, ring the bell so you won't miss the next stories, and tell me in the comments what you'd have done at that spruce. Your thoughts help more people find these survival and wildlife stories, and they honestly keep me going out here. The weeks after the gunshot felt like living inside a clock you can't see, everything ticking towards something. The ranchers held meetings. The town council added large predator management to 3 agendas in a row. A developer with tidy hair and a newer truck started showing up with glossy brochures about safe growth and reducing wildlife conflicts, which read like euphemisms for fewer wolves and more cul-de-sacs. I kept training. I kept records. I kept asking myself the right-sized question. Am I still the safest option for them today? Every night that answer was yes, and every night it cost a little more to buy. Ryan swung by more. He stopped talking to me like a headline and started talking to me like a person who knew how to count tracks. He brought hair samples from a barbed fence 3 properties over. I showed him the undercoat from Willow's spring shed so he could compare. The fence hair was coarser, longer, almost bear-like, but wrong in a way my fingertips couldn't translate. Hybrid? He asked. Maybe, I said. Or something no one wants to put a label on yet. Another you went missing. Then 2 goats on the far side of the highway. The camera footage stayed the same, dark, hulking, a glint of eye shine that could have belonged to half the nightmares in North America. Online the comments got meaner. At the diner, conversation stopped when I walked in. People are brave in packs. I hosted an open day anyway. 20 people came up the drive. Teachers, a logger, a teen who wanted to be a biologist, 3 ranch wives who admitted they were there to prove me wrong. We stayed outside the fence. We kept the rules strict. We worked obedience and impulse control like we were rehearsing for the world to watch. Ash sat on a dime and held a downstay while a deer bounded along the trees. Frost took a puzzle feeder apart with his paws and the kind of patience it takes most men a lifetime to learn. Willow did the hardest thing of all for a shy soul. She came forward. She took a sliver of venison and rested her chin against my knuckles for exactly 1 breath. For a blink, I watched fear crack open and let awe in. By that evening, a shaky cell phone video started circulating. Something big moving on the far side of the timber, long-backed and heavy through the shoulders, too fluid for a bear, too quiet for a person. The caption did the rest. Spack. The timing framed us like a crime scene. That night, Ash patrolled the fence line until his pads were dusty. Frost planted himself where he could see both me and the trees. Willow pressed against the inside corner, ears high, reading the air like it was Braille. I made tea I didn't drink and sat on the porch until the sky turned the color of a bruise. Somewhere down the slope, a radio crackled. Somewhere farther, a door slammed. The forest held its breath. I didn't sleep. By the second week of September, the nights came earlier, the light sliding off the ridges like it didn't want to linger. And the air, it had that quiet weight I've only ever felt before a storm or a funeral. Ash felt it first. He started doing double patrols along the enclosure fence, moving low and deliberate, ears swiveling toward the timber like he was counting heartbeats out there. Frost mirrored him, slower but no less watchful, his eyes finding the same dark pockets between the trees. Willow stuck closer to me than she had since those first weeks, a shadow with paws. One night, just after midnight, the wolf's posture changed all at once. Heads up, tails stiff, bodies tense. The sound came a moment later, a low, rolling growl from beyond the tree line, deep enough to vibrate in my ribs. It wasn't coyote. It wasn't bear. And it sure as hell wasn't human. I grabbed the flashlight and stepped to the fence. My beam cut across trunks and brush, but the sound had already moved, fast, circling. Ash followed it with the precision of a compass needle. Willow let out a single high-pitched bark, something she'd never done before, then froze. That growl haunted me long after it stopped. It was a voice that didn't belong to any file in my head. The next morning, Deputy Ryan came by with fresh tracks. South pasture. You need to see these. We drove out past the old logging road to where the grass bent under the imprint of something large. 4 toes. No claw marks. Pads wide enough I could fit my entire hand inside one print. Too big for a dog, I said. Too light for a bear, Ryan countered. Mountain lion? He shook his head. Strides wrong. And look here, 2 sets. One heavier, one smaller, both in step. I glanced toward the timber the same way Ash always did. It's hunting in pairs. Ryan didn't answer, just took a slow breath through his teeth. By Friday, the whispers in Ravine Falls weren't whispers anymore. At the feed store, 2 ranchers argued about whether to form an informal night patrol. At the gas station, I overheard someone say they'd take the shot and ask questions later. The developer, smelling opportunity, showed up at the town meeting with a slideshow of idyllic cul-de-sacs and children playing in fenced yards. He wrapped every fear in a promise of safety. People clapped. I sat in the back, arms crossed, feeling like the last tree on a lot marked for clearing. That weekend, I set the trail cams in a wider arc, farther from my property than before. 3 nights passed with nothing but raccoons, deer, and one very confused owl. On the 4th, just before dawn, the footage caught something. A silhouette moving between the aspens, big through the chest, tapering to hips too narrow for a bear. The motion was fluid, deliberate. On one frame, a flash of eyeshine, amber, not the green-white you get from most canines. I watched it twice. 3 times. It felt like looking at a word you know but can't pronounce. I sent the clip to Ryan. His reply came back fast. We need to talk. We met at the edge of my property, no uniforms, no official paper. This thing, he said, whatever it is, it's not acting like a random predator. It's avoiding main trails. Avoiding people. And it's circling the same areas over and over. Scouting? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Could be. Could be something got displaced. Construction crews pushing wildlife out. Could be someone's hybrid got loose. He looked at me a long time. Could be worse. I knew what he meant. Not supernatural worse, real worse. Something bred without oversight, without fear, something that sees territory the way humans see a blank check. That night, another gunshot. This one closer. Ash's bark rolled into a howl, deep and long, Frost joining in until the sound wrapped around the cabin like a living wall. Willow pressed herself to my leg, trembling. I called the wolves off and stayed on the porch until the moon tipped toward the far ridge. Somewhere in the dark, a branch cracked. Something was moving, slow, just past the line where the flashlight faded. I didn't go inside. The next morning, a note was taped to my gate. No signature. Just 5 words in block letters. Send them away. Before. No, before what? Ryan came that afternoon. You're running out of road, Evelyn. If something happens, livestock or God forbid a person, this town will take the choice away from you. I wanted to tell him the truth, that the wolves were the only thing keeping me from feeling hunted myself. That their eyes on the treeline were the only reason I still slept at all. Instead I said, I'm not giving them up. 2 nights later my camera caught it again. Closer this time. The frame cut off the head, but the body filled the screen, thick muscle under a coat so dark it drank the light. In the lower corner, a second shape, smaller but moving in perfect sync. The footage ended when Ash slammed into the fence, barking low and hard, Willow at his flank, Frost standing between them and the shadow beyond. I played it back until the battery died. The next day, the council voted to petition the state for predator intervention. I knew what that meant. The petition passed 6-1. That night, the forest went silent an hour early. Even the crickets shut up. Ash froze at the fence, head turned to the right. Frost's hackles lifted. Willow stepped forward, just 1 step, then stopped, staring into the dark. I followed their gaze. Something moved. 2 points of amber light hung there, steady, too high off the ground for any wolf I'd ever seen. And then, blink, they were gone. The morning after those eyes in the dark, I woke to find fresh prints along the far fence line, deep, clean, and running parallel for almost 30 yards. Ash had tracked them all night, his own prints overlapping the intruders in a shadow dance. The pads in those tracks were too wide for a mountain lion, too long for a dog. And they weren't mine. Ryan came out before breakfast, crouched over the marks, and exhaled slowly. Still 2, he said. Still moving together. I looked toward the timber. They were here longer than they wanted us to know. He nodded once. They're testing you. By noon, the wind had shifted, carrying the scent of smoke from somewhere west. The wolves caught it before I did. Willow paced the back of the enclosure, tail low but moving, her eyes flicking from me to the treeline. Frost stood with his head high, tasting the air, reading a story I couldn't. Ash didn't move at all, just stared into the forest like he could will it to confess. That's when I heard tires crunching on my gravel drive. 3 trucks. No license plates on the front. Men in hunting gear stepped out, rifles slung loose, expressions carved from the same mold. Suspicion and purpose. They didn't bother knocking. You need to put those wolves down before someone else does, the one in the lead said. His voice had the weight of someone who wasn't making a suggestion. They're not your problem, I told him. They're everyone's problem. And if that thing out there's working with them. I cut him off. You don't know what's out there. One of the others smirked. We know enough. We've been tracking it since August. The way he said it made my stomach tighten. They left without more words, but one of them ran his hand along the fence as he went, dragging a fingernail over the wire like he was memorizing its give. That night, Ryan called from the road. I can't be here 24/7, Evelyn. Keep them locked in. If you hear anything, call me first, not the council. Understand? I understood. It didn't make me feel any safer. Around 2 a.m. the wolves woke me. Not with noise, at first, but with silence. That electric, wrong kind of silence that empties the air. Then Ash barked once, sharp, and I heard the sound that stayed with me since. The slow, deliberate crack of wood under weight. I grabbed the flashlight, stepped onto the porch, and froze. At the edge of the beam stood a shape just beyond full detail. Shoulders too high, body too still. The light caught the edge of an ear, triangular, furred, nothing unusual, until it moved sideways, not forward, with a fluidity that didn't match any predator I knew. Then, in the shadows behind it, a second pair of eyes. Ash's growl rumbled so low I felt it in my feet. Frost paced between him and Willow, who was pressed against the fence, ears pinned back but eyes locked forward. I swept the beam wider, but the shapes slipped back into the trees like smoke. The next morning I found the damage. A section of the outer fence bent inward, the wire warped as if something had leaned its full weight against it. Not to break in, but to test it. To measure it. The council posted a notice that afternoon. State agents arriving in 48 hours. Predator removal authorized. I didn't need to read between the lines. I had 2 days to decide whether to let strangers take my wolves, or risk a standoff that could end with them bleeding out on the ground they were raised on. That night, I sat by the fence, one hand resting against Ash's shoulder. "You're not the monster they think you are," I whispered. His eyes found mine, steady, unblinking. Frost lay at my other side, Willow tucked between us like the smallest ember in a fire we were barely keeping lit. The wind shifted again, this time carrying something else. "Musky." "Wrong." "Close." Ash rose first. Frost followed, his body angling toward the back corner of the enclosure. Willow's ears pricked forward and she let out a sound I'd never heard from her before, a short, sharp warning. I turned, flashlight ready. 2 shapes stood just beyond the fence line. The bigger one's breath puffed white in the cold. The smaller paced, eyes locked on mine. And then, from somewhere behind me, gravel crunched, truck tires. Headlights flicked through the trees. I was between the wolves, the predators, and a line of armed men rolling up my drive. The truck stopped just short of my porch light, their engines idling like growls. 4 men got out, 3 from the night before, plus 1 new face, older, heavier, carrying his rifle like a handshake he'd already decided on. "Evening," the leader said, eyes flicking past me to the enclosure. "We heard you've got company in the woods again." "I've got my own company handled," I told him. "Not for long," he said and started toward the fence. Ash moved with him, pacing on the inside, each step matching the man's. Frost flanked him, shoulders high, tail straight. Willow stayed back, but her gaze was fixed, unblinking on the tree line. "I'm not letting you near them," I said. The older man spit into the gravel. "Then maybe we'll just deal with what's out there." He swung his headlamp toward the forest. That's when I saw them, 2 shapes between the trunks, closer than they'd been before. The beam caught the taller one's chest, heavy muscle under a coat so dark it seemed to swallow light. The smaller one moved in a half-circle, not afraid, not rushing, just patient. "They're here," one of the men said. "You think those are with her wolves?" another asked. Ash let out a low, rolling snarl and the bigger shape in the trees froze, ears high. For a moment, predator met predator across a thin wire of air, and neither backed down. The men raised their rifles. "Don't," I said. One of them glanced at me. "Lady, this is already out of your hands." Then from the left, movement. Not the shapes in the trees. Something else. A shadow slipping between us, fast and silent, until it stopped in the open. It was bigger than I'd imagined. Taller at the shoulder than Ash, heavier through the chest, but its face looked wrong. Elongated. The eyes sat too far forward for a wolf, but too wide for a dog. And when it exhaled, the steam came in slow, controlled puffs, like it was measuring us. The smaller shape stepped up beside it. The standoff stretched so tight I could feel the air thinning. The men's rifles tracked. The wolves inside the fence pressed against the wire, muscles trembling. Frost positioned himself between Willow and the predator, head low, teeth just visible in the porch light. Ryan's voice cut through the dark like a snapped branch. "Drop the rifles." His truck's headlights swung into the drive, high beams flooding the clearing. The predators blinked but didn't move. "Evelyn," he said, never taking his eyes off the tree line, "get them inside." I didn't move. "If I open that gate, they'll see it as a challenge." "Then decide now," he said, his tone flat. "You've got seconds." In those seconds, the larger predator stepped forward, one slow, deliberate pace. Ash matched it from inside the fence, his growl dropping to something primal. Frost's tail was stiff as a spear. Willow stayed pressed against my leg, trembling but silent. Behind me, a man clicked off his rifle safety. Ryan's voice rose, sharp. "Don't you?" The first gunshot split the night. The predators bolted. Ash lunged at the fence, Frost right behind him, the wire straining under their weight. Willow yelped and darted to the far corner. Another shot. This one closer. Ryan shouted something I didn't hear. My hands were already on the gate latch. I had a choice: keep them penned in while strangers fired into the dark, or let them out to defend the only home they'd ever known. I pulled the latch. The latch gave with a metallic snap and the gate swung wide. Ash was out first, a dark streak low to the ground, Frost half a heartbeat behind, his stride longer, steadier. Willow hesitated, eyes locked on me until I whispered, "Go." Then she slipped through, quick and silent as falling snow. The men shouted, rifles half-shouldered, trying to track shadows that didn't belong to them. Ryan barked orders I barely heard over the pounding in my chest. From the treeline came the sound I'd been waiting for and dreading all at once. A deep, resonant snarl answered by Ash's roar. The larger predator stepped into the open, head low, eyes locked on my wolves. The smaller one flanked right, angling for the fence corner. Frost cut it off, his body a moving wall. Ash met the larger head-on, their bodies colliding with a thud that seemed to shake the ground. Willow darted between them and me, keeping herself between my legs and the chaos, her eyes never leaving the fight. A rifle cracked. Bark exploded from a tree trunk 2 feet from the predators. They scattered, one into the dark, the other circling wide. Ash and Frost chased, not to kill, but to push them back into the timber where the night could swallow them whole. "Call them back," Ryan yelled. I whistled once, sharp. It was a sound we'd practiced for months, the one that meant stop where you are and come home. For a moment I thought it was too late. Then through the darkness 2 shapes reappeared, shoulders heaving, eyes wild but alive. They ran straight to me and into the safety of the open gate. Willow slipped in last, silent as she'd left. I slammed the latch home. The men lowered their rifles, some muttering, some silent. The older one, still breathing hard, looked at me and shook his head. "You won't be able to hold this line forever." Ryan stepped between us. "You've done enough for one night," he told them, flat as stone. They didn't argue. When their trucks were gone, the clearing felt too big, too quiet. Inside the enclosure, Ash paced once around the perimeter before lying down against the far fence, his eyes still on the trees. Frost settled beside him, head resting on his brother's shoulders, ears twitching at sounds I couldn't hear. Willow pressed herself against my leg and finally exhaled. I knelt, ran my hands through their fur, and tried to memorize the weight of them, the heat, the way their breathing slowly fell into sync. I didn't know if I'd get many more nights like this. Ryan stood at the gate. "State agents are still coming. 2 days from now." "They saw tonight," I said. "They'll say it doesn't matter." I looked back at the wolves. "It matters to me." Later, long after Ryan's taillights disappeared down the ridge, I sat on the porch with the trail cam footage on my laptop. The final frame from tonight stopped me cold. The predators were there, yes, but in the background, half hidden in shadow, was another figure. Upright. Watching. Too far for detail. Not moving to help, not moving to harm. Just there. In the forest beyond my fence, something howled, not my wolves, not anything I'd ever heard before. Ash lifted his head, ears pricked forward. Frost joined him. Willow stayed pressed against my knee. And in that moment I understood 2 things at once. 1, I'd bought us time. 2, I hadn't bought us safety.